How's it going, everyone? Welcome to my video. I hope you are all doing well. And today we are going to be looking at some games played by the United States chess champion, Fabiano Caruana. If you don't know, recently the United States Chess Championship concluded with Fabiano winning the event by a score of, I believe, 5 wins and 6 draws, or 6 wins and 5 draws. I forget the exact result, but I'll have the results up over here. And so this is a spoiler. I mean, the idea of this video was to know that Fabiano had won the US championship, but I do want to take a look at some of these games and just kind of look a little bit into how he won it, like the techniques he used against his opponents and things like that. And I think it would be really interesting to go over. But before we do that, if you enjoy this video and want more in-depth analysis videos like this, educational content, even shorts, blitz games, things like that, feel free to smash that subscribe button. Appreciate everyone who has done so, and the more subscribers, the more videos I will have out. So just hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this content. All right, with that being said, we're going to be looking at this first game that was played against Grigory Oparin. Now, Oparin is actually Fabiano's trainer, so it was pretty interesting that they were paired in round one, and actually Oparin had a pretty significant role in helping Fabiano win the US Championship, and not just by directly training him. So we're going to be looking at, I believe, 7 games today, and so we'll see how much time we have for in-depth analysis. There might be some games where I just go through the whole game, including the opening to the bitter end. There might be other games where I skip to a certain point. We'll kind of see how it flows, right? So Fabiano plays d4, and the opening that results is a Nimzo Indian by Grigory playing bishop b4. Here, Fabiano plays queen c2. And this position, Grigory plays d5. Then after a3, bishop takes. This one I thought was pretty interesting. I think most people play queen takes, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I do want to kind of fact check myself. Yeah, most people play queen takes, actually by a wide margin. So I saw it was pretty interesting that Fabiano took at the b pawn. I assume he just wants to imbalance. Queen takes is a well-explored position, and he has the open b file, has some compensation to work with, so I don't completely blame him, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Clearly, Fabiano has something up his sleeve. c6, knight f3, b6, bishop g5, bishop h4. After knight b7, e3, castles. You expect Fabio to do something like bishop d3 and castles. Maybe he's going to take on d5 first, play for c4, something like that, but g4. And we already see move 11 of the US Championship. Fabiano Caruana is out for blood. The obvious idea behind g4 is that the pawn is trying to go to g5 and simply open up the black king. As we'll see in a few moves, having that g-file is going to be such an advantage for Fabiano. Now, first question you might ask yourself is, why can't you take the pawn? Oh, because it's pinned. Duh. Well, what if I try to break the pin and then win the pawn after bishop g3, knight takes? It's just too risky. Fabi can play a move like h4, and you're really just spotting Fabiano like an open king side. It's very, very risky to play like this. So after g4, Grigory plays the logical move, just going queen e8. I don't know why I keep thinking like I see something, but anyway, Grigory plays queen e8, and then after g5, h takes, knight takes. We kind of see the idea behind Fabiano's g5, a little bit later, especially, after rook g1. And it's quite simply that he has the open g-file to work with. And he has the open g-file, and you might be thinking, oh, but what about the king, because you're supposed to castle king side. And if you go queen side, well, that's probably also unsafe. Well, the king is perfectly safe in the middle. There are no open lines, especially now that e4 was played. The e and d files are going to be blocked, and there's really nothing that black can target. So honestly, white gets to call the shots here. White has the initiative here. So after rook g1, Grigory plays bishop b7, which does highlight another characteristic that this bishop was not really doing much. It's going to be biting on granite on d5. Rest in peace, by the way, Daniel Naroditsky. I believe that was a Daniel Naroditsky reference. And yeah, the bishop on g4, sorry, on c8, was not really able to do much on this diagonal, to say. So I guess he puts on b7 to defend d5 and maybe open up the rook to c8 as well, but clearly black's pieces are not doing that great. Fabiano plays knight h3, so he realizes that the knight's going to be better placed on f4, where you can maybe target d5, but also maybe there's some potential kingside targets from h5 and squares like that. Also, I do want you to know one more thing. Let's go back just a little, even before g5. Just keep in mind the bishop on h4, it just sits there pretty much the whole game until the bitter end. So, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Back to the regularly scheduled programming. Rook g1, knight h3, knight h7, Grigory plays. Knight h7 probably just has the idea to just maybe put the, actually, I don't know. Maybe try to put the other knight on f6 eventually and like just kind of like hunker down and defend. Maybe he's going to move the queen, rook, knight f8. I'm not exactly sure, but Fabiano plays queen e2, clearly just kind of going for the throat with queen g4, threatening checkmate potentially. Then after queen c8, this is a moment that I liked because, well, not necessarily Grigory attacking the pawn, although, I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? But remember how I highlighted earlier that Fabiano is not worried about his king at all? King d2. He's like, I do not need to castle. Obviously, I cannot legally castle kingside. If I go queenside ever, well, that's probably most likely going to end in a disaster. Well, maybe not if he had gone like queen c2 and castles queenside. I could see that working, but he's like, my king is perfectly safe on d2. I'm protecting the c3 pawn. It's not like you're going to have reinforcements coming anytime soon, and there are no real open lines towards the king. The only one might be like the c line, but he's going to be able to easily defend it with a move like rook c1 if he absolutely needs to. So after king d2, this is where Grigory officially blunders, although it's a very difficult position to play. I think the best move was like knight f6 or something like that, just kind of like, again, hunkering down and defending. But here, Grigory plays knight c5. Now, at first, you might be thinking, well, it's a blunder because he can take. Well, it's not that simple. These 2650 GMs aren't just going to hang a knight for no reason, especially in a classical game. So you might be thinking, well, why is that not even an obvious blunder? Oh, because the queen also eyes the knight on h3. Now, there are a couple of possible continuations for Fabiano. Fabi actually played the most accurate line, which is just to take the knight. And then after queen takes h3, went queen h5 and simply has an overwhelming attack. We'll get to that here in a second. Another line that was super cool, it would have been really cool if we had seen this, we didn't get to though, is if Fabi had sacked the rook with rook takes g7. The idea being that after king takes g7, he goes rook g1, and the king can really only go to h8 or h6. If the king goes to h8, then Fabi can play the move queen h5, and quite simply, the queen from h5 is threatening like bishop f6, there's knight g5 threats as well, and this would be way too overwhelming for Grigory to defend. And if king h6, which is basically just kind of like, you know, you're just kind of like, I mean, just living on a prayer, right? You're just cut off from the g file. Then bishop g3 would have been a really good move to sort of threaten bishop f4 checkmate and just put the game on lock from here. We didn't see rook takes g7. My guess is that Fabi just wanted to play something he thought was a little bit more accurate by taking the knight and then playing queen h5. And he probably thought this was just as winning and didn't necessarily see the need to go for the shenanigans. I'm sure he saw rook takes g7, saw all the lines and things like that, but he probably saw this as like a safer but as effective option. So queen h5 happened, g6, and then the only idea behind g6, I believe, was to just prevent rook takes g6 and bishop f6, which would win the queen. And it might seem like let's just say he played like rook c8 or something, and then rook takes g7, king takes. It might seem like you're sacrificing a lot of pieces for the queen, but the king is wide open. Your rook can come in, the knight is hanging. This would just be absolutely winning for Fabiano. So after g6, now note that g6 does not actually threaten the queen because of the rook. So Fabi has time to play c6, just kind of shutting the bishop down, bishop c8. And then, bam! Rook takes g6. Fabiano sacrifices the rook! The idea being that after f takes g6, queen takes g6, king h8, Fabi plays rook g1, and after bishop g4, again, the threat behind rook g1 is just to play queen takes g7, sorry, queen to g7. You know what? I just realized this. I think that's why he played c6, was to force the bishop to c8, and the rook cannot go to g8, because now the rooks are disconnected. Wow. So just showing you again, He goes c6 in this position. He goes c6 because now the bishop has no other square to go to other than c8. And then he can just sack like normal, then play rook g1. And the rook, a rook, is not able to go to the g8 square because the bishop is blocking it. Wow. That's some high-level stuff by Fabiano. But I'm not surprised. But after bishop g4, rook takes g4, rook f7. Remember how I talked about this bishop kind of being the star of the show later in the game? Bam. And it was in this position that Grigory Oparin resigned the game. Quite simply, the bishop is headed to e5, and there is not much you can do about it. Not to mention, like, the rook on f7's hanging, and just things like that. So, with that said, Fabiano takes the round 1 win. And round 2 was a draw, although I'm still going to show this, because this actually, if anything, sort of shows the resilience of Fabiano Caruana. Fabiano has the white pieces against Andy Woodward, who is just a rising talent from Texas. He's like at least 2550, if not 2600 already. And I think he's only like 14 or 15 or something like that. If you're on any like chess social media, just in the know, you'll just know that he is such a rising star. And Fabiano was actually losing in this game out of the opening, which is very rare for someone so well prepared like him. C4, E5. Now, I'm not really going to go into like what I thought Fabiano did wrong in the opening. I'm sure it was explained in a press conference or something like that, which I didn't watch like all the press conferences or the analysis or anything like that. Most of this is just my raw analysis, which is why you should subscribe. All right. But my guess is that playing this combination of like E3, G3, it's a little bit slow, and also the queen being on B3 is a little bit no man's land. So I'm not exactly sure what his idea was. And again, like, A3 is a little slow. Like, I'm not sure what's up with that. Again, who am I to criticize Fabiano Caruana's play, right? But clearly, this did not go well for him, at least in the opening. And after Andy's move bishop f5, is in this position where Fabiano kind of takes the forbidden pawn, queen takes b7, and Andy unleashes knight d4. Knight d4 simply just hangs a knight in thin air. But the idea is that pawn takes d4, which is what happened. Pawn takes d4. There are simply ideas of the rook going to the e3 square. Sorry, the e8 square. And the bishop going to d3. And the king is just kind of in trouble. So, after e takes d4, if Fabi just moves the knight, like knight a4 or something, then Andy can play rook e8 check. And then after a move like knight e2, there's even like apparently there's even rook takes e2. I'm just seeing this line for the first time. Queen e8 check. Then after king d1, there's like knight g4. Absolutely ridiculous. Rook f1, d3, and this is just a bloodbath. Like, oh my. So after pawn takes d4, it is in Fabiano's best interest to just give the knight back. So he plays queen f3, and Andy plays bishop g4. The idea behind bishop g4 looks like the rook is hanging, but if the rook were to be taken, then Andy can play queen e7 check and win the queen. So after bishop g4, Fabiano plays queen d3, and Andy takes the knight. Fabi recaptures, and after rook e8, Fabi plays king to f1. And it's just a very sucky position for white. I mean, white's up a pawn. I mean, yay, whoop-de-doo, you're up a pawn, but, I mean, your extra pawn's doubled anyway. But, you know, black has the bishop. Well, I guess they both have the bishop pair, but the king is in the middle. You're very little developed. You're not well developed, and Andy's doing just really good in this position. So Andy reroutes the knight to the d7 square. The idea to go to e5. Now, Fabiano is not going to even, like, consider, with one single brain cell, taking this rook. One, I think it just loses, because I think after bishop takes, Andy would just play queen takes, and I'm not sure what you do about this. I guess he can play f3, but then there's bishop takes g1, apparently, and then bishop takes, and this would just be, again, just be a nightmare for the white pieces. So after knight d7, Fabiano plays knight f3, and then after knight e5, I think it was kind of in this moment where, now maybe if I watch a press conference or something, it's kind of realized a little bit later, but I think Fabi realized what he needed to do was he needed to trade knights, then play bishop f4, rook e2, and just sack the queen. Queen takes e2, bishop takes e2, king takes e2. And so he sacks the queen, and Andy still has a queen as well as a bishop and a rook to work with. So it's not like it's necessarily a fortress here, but you just watch the game progress. Fabi plays b4, bishop c6, rook c8, rook e1, h4, and eventually trades bishops, and suddenly it's just kind of a fortress. You just look at this position, and it's like, where did black's advantage go? I mean, Andy got a pawn back, but the bishop is solidified, the rook's controlling the open file, and the queen does not really have a good way to wreak havoc. But also the rook has literally nothing to do. Like, you can't go to e8. I mean, maybe you could try to open something up here, but even that might be a little bit risky, opening up your own kingside. There might be like a bishop b5 check. Sorry, bishop d5 check and rook e7, things like that. So after queen takes a3, speaking of which, Fabi plays bishop d5, king g2, and just kind of holds the fortress together. And if anything, a little bit later, it's actually Fabiano who might be playing for the win after g4 and rook takes g4. Because now he has a passed pawn to work with. It's the type of game, like if this were a game between two 1200s, I think that any side could win or lose. But if you're watching this live, you probably saw the eval bar was zeros and assumed the game would end in a draw. But absolutely crazy that Fabiano came back from that losing out of the opening and just kind of hunkered down and was like, I'm just going to sack my queen and just hold it all together. I think a lot of players, even at like 2700 level, probably would have like crumbled and like not played as accurately, especially if like you're playing a kid and you're losing after move 12 and things like that, but not Fabiano. That's part of the reason why he is a 4-time in a row US champion. Um, let's look at this towards the end real quick, but Andy forces the draw by sacking the queen. The idea being that even if this pawn were gone, this pawn that is, black can just go to the corner, and because the pawn's queening on a dark square, this bishop can never help in terms of like not stalemating. And then the game just ends in a stalemate here. So that was round 2. Rounds 3 and 4 were draws against, I believe, Wander Liang and Sam Sevian, if I'm not mistaken. The next game I want to look at real quick is round 5 against Darius Wirtz. And this was a Caro-Kann. Don't really have too much substantial thoughts about the opening, but it does become clear this is going to be a fight when keep in mind in a Caro-Kann, you're moving your C and B pawns. Sorry, D pawn I meant to say, and your A pawn move, but he castles queenside anyway. Which sometimes the way that super GMs play can be a bit of an oxymoron. I think that's the word. Maybe it's a little bit hyperbolic, but basically, you know, normally you teach beginners like, oh, if you're like pushing pawns on one side of the board, don't castle that way. But Fabiano recognizes that he's totally safe there, and the opportunity cost is there to sort of play like rook g8 and then start just doing things on the king side. And we'll see Darius play rook b8, and then a4, a5, kind of lock things up, which this was, I think, considered a mistake. He should have just taken the pawn, I believe, and just like gone rook a1, just kind of kept the game open. But Darius played a5, then after rook d to g8, it's time for Fabiano to sort of do Fabiano things, right? So he plays g6 and then h5. I mean, I thought the way he did it was a little interesting. Like, I'm not sure, like, what determined, like, why he played g6 and not g5, and then, like, he went, like, here, then rook h7, I think. So it was a little interesting how he did things, but he got a pretty overwhelming advantage. I think Darius's move f4 kind of provoked Fabi to eventually play g5, so maybe he could have avoided that. I'm not exactly sure. But I'm sure that if he had played something, I mean, again, the position's locked, so it's really hard to say what to do. Maybe he just plays like bishop e3. Like, who's to say that Fabi can't play like, you know, like queen fa, go slow or something like that. Maybe not queen fa, but like saying the best move is knight f8. I'm trying to determine what the plan is. I mean, it even has king c8 up there, so I'm not even exactly sure like what black should be doing. I was wondering about g5. I think there's knight takes h5. So can I defend the h5 square? Maybe if I play like. See, that's why. Well, no, never mind. Don't listen to my analysis. But anyway, after f4, this did kind of allow Fabi sort of a lifeline to play g5, and once again just open things up at the king side. Knight e2, and then eventually Fabi's attack just got too overwhelming, and Darius was forced to sacrifice the queen. Well, not really sacrifice. I mean, you know, it's basically an equal trade, but given how wide open the king is, it's pretty bad for black. Sorry, it's pretty bad for white. It's pretty bad for white. Um, and then this might seem to draw parallels to the first game where, no, sorry, the second game where Fabiano sacked his queen and was able to hold a fortress. Here, it's not really going to be the case. I mean, Darius is trying, and knight e3, rook takes, queen takes. And this is a position I kind of wanted to highlight. Well, after rook f7, king e8, rook f4. Sorry, rook f3, queen c1, king e2. Yeah, we'll highlight here. So, if you note this position, if you take a look at this position, it's hard otherwise. Like, it's hard for just the queen to do anything because you're not really able to attack, like, a pawn because the rook is defending. Part of the key idea behind defending these endgames where one side has a queen and the other doesn't is keeping your rook on the third rank so that quite simply, like, you know, if the king ever, like, tries to infiltrate, the rook can't really get past. Sorry, the king can't really get past because of the rook. If this knight were on the e5 square, then this would be a draw, I believe, because, and we're just going to play some moves like king e7 and then knight e5. This would be a draw because quite simply, now the knight is blockading the only kind of remaining mobile pawn, and I was looking at a line, like, black could try to go after the pawn, even take it, but apparently, and I kind of glossed over, but after queen h1, the best move is literally to allow the pawn to be taken with check. After king f2, queen takes h4, king g2, and again, you just kind of chill with your rook. I mean, like, the pawn is not going anywhere, the rook is not going anywhere, you can literally just chill, and there's nothing to do. So after king e2, Fabiano does find the only, well, it's not the only good move because of some checks. The only good idea, I should say, which is e5. The idea behind e5 after it takes, d4, c3. And this passed pawn is going to make all the difference. I mean, Fabiano just sacrificed 2 pawns, just gave him away like that, but he's going to have one strong pawn that is going to help decide things. Now, things get a little bit tricky here after knight e4, c2, knight d6 check, king d7, d5. I'll give white an exclamation point for kind of the valiant effort. And the reason d5 is tricky is because after queen d1, king f2, I'm sure a lot of, like, beginner level players would be like, oh yes, I can make a second queen. But making a second queen draws after rook f7. And quite simply, because of these pawns, the king cannot go forward. And also because of this pawn, you can't even, like, just hide or something like that. After king d8, knight b7 draws, but I think the most kind of straightforward way is rook f8. And then you can just repeat. If king c7, you play rook f7 anyway. And the king cannot go back. Like, you could literally pre-move rook f8, rook f7. Actually, well, not literally, because if the king goes to e7, well, yeah, you can still play rook f7. Right, so you just pre-move rook f7, rook f8, and you draw. So, obviously, Fabiano knows this, and does not queen the pawn immediately. He goes queen d2, queen e1, and then takes the pawn, and now that the pawn is gone, Darius resigns the game because of rook f7, then black can just take the knight. So, that was round 5 out of 11. Round 6 is a game I want to look at as well. This was a draw, but I thought would be pretty interesting to look at. Now, I didn't really analyze much of this game in detail, so we'll kind of skip over it. I'm sure there are, like, a lot of very intriguing details that we could kind of, like, go through. Like, I thought this, like, g6 idea was very enterprising by Fabiano, just kind of forcing Wesley's hand in some certain things, but I think it's worth mentioning that, Fabiano was completely winning. It's not just like, oh, +1 winning. Like, you look at the graph bar, like, Fabiano at some point, like, yeah, he found this beautiful idea with rook h6 check. The idea being if knight takes, queen takes g7 is mate. After king g8, rook h7, like, Fabi is just going to win this game. Fabiano is absolutely going to win this game. He takes the pawn with check. If he finds the move queen d8 or queen b8 with the idea to go queen h8 or f8. Like, literally, and this must be, the engine I'm seeing is not, like, this is like mate in 11 or something like that. It's like force mate here. But Fabi messes up here by playing queen f6. And then after queen g8, Wesley is able to sort of consolidate. Fabi tries knight f7, after king h7, knight g5. Obviously, Fabi's not going to repeat, so he takes the pawn. But then after queen g7, it's just like, It's all for naught. And I mean, Fabi's up a pawn. Well, I mean, I guess not anymore since he took it back. And if he trades, like, that's not really going to do any good. Like, sure, you're up a pawn, but this bishop's, like, blocking it, and, like, the knight, you're not really able to, like, convert this. Or it'd be very difficult, I should say. But after queen e4, I mean, yeah, this game just ended in a draw. I thought that would be pretty interesting to look at because these were, like, two top-tier contenders of the U.S. Championship, and Fabiano was absolutely on the precipice of winning. But one mess up, and then Wesley So just kind of defended. Now on to the next game against the bad boy of chess, Hans Niemann. Now I thought this was quite a simply beautiful demonstration of opening, surprise, and preparation by Fabiano Caruana. And apparently, according to his press conference, which I did watch a little bit of it, this was just an opening idea that he was talking to his trainer about over dinner, and his trainer, like, reminded him, I think in Fabi's words, like, he reminded me that the line exists or something like that, which is e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, d6, c3, f5. This is what Fabi plays over the board, and Hans Niemann in this position, sorry, after d3, d3 was the best move, but after queen f6, Hans Niemann did not have a good answer to this and just castled. The reason castles is not very good is because it allows Fabi to play f4, and quite simply, g5, h5, g4, bishop coming in, knights coming in. Hans' kingside is about to get smoked. You'll see during this game. I believe the best move was after queen f6. What was the best move, actually? I actually do not know. Dare I criticize someone and not know what the best move was? Apparently, like, knight d2 was the best move. I guess the idea is that, like, after f4, you're just keeping your options open. Like, you don't have to castle kingside yet. It's saying that here h4 is the best move, which is really interesting. h4, and then if h6, there's h5. So I guess the idea was that Hans shouldn't have committed his king one way or the other. Because now that he commits his king, Fabiano has all the privileges in the world to just go after Hans's throat. After b4, g5, yeah, things just start to get really ugly for Hans. Hans tries to strike in the center with d4, but then after g4, h5, I mean, Fabiano's just coming. Fabiano Caruana is just coming. And I'm not doing some super deep analysis of this. I mean, like, honestly, it doesn't even take like a 1200 to realize that, like, oh, Fabiano's pieces and its pawns are all surrounding Hans's king. F3 is played. And h4. And then, soon enough, I mean, Fabiano finds this beautiful maneuver with rook d7, rook h7, just utilizing the other rook on the h-file. And the h-file is open, the queen is used, and I believe it was in this position, yeah. Here, Hans just resigned. Hans got absolutely destroyed. And, yeah, I mean, it goes to show, like, I think a lot of people, like, when you talk to, like, a lot of, like, chess players, I think especially, like, Hikaru says this a lot. Well, I mean, he has the platform, too, so he probably has. But a lot of the top chess players respect Fabiano Caruana as one of the best opening preparers in the game. He's not necessarily the best player in the world. That'll go to Magnus. He's not gonna be the most, like, he's not the best at, like, Blitz. That's probably, like, Hikaru or, like, Alireza or someone. He's not necessarily the best defender. That's gonna be Hikaru, but he is probably the best prepared chess player in the world. And it just goes to show games like this. Like, he just kind of, like, pulls out this, like, d6, f5 sort of opening idea against Hans and absolutely destroys him. Now, so that was round 6. No, sorry, that was round 7. In round 8, Fabiano had a draw against Ray Robson. I think Fabiano was pressing a little bit, but it ended in a draw. Round 9, this is the third to final round against former U.S. champion Sam Shankland. And this was one, for the most part, was headed towards a draw. There was one moment that I thought was really interesting, though, in the middle game, which is this move f5. Now, it looks like here, if I just tell you, like, black to play and find a tactic, you might, I mean, depending on your level, you might think a little bit and be like, oh, there's bishop takes a3. Because if pawn takes a3, queen takes c3. And probably an over-the-board game, even for a player, like, at my level, it might be tempting to go for that. But I do give Fabi credit for not going for this. And the reason is, After bishop takes a3, Sam Shankland, for all intents and purposes, can force a draw. Instead of just recapturing and letting his bishop hang, he's going to do his own bishop sacrifice on the diametrically other side of the board by playing bishop takes h7. After king takes h7, queen h5, and there's a double sack with bishop takes g7, and then just going to force a draw. And to Fabiano's credit, he did not want a draw in this position. I don't remember like what the tournament standings was or anything like that. I'm pretty sure Fabiano had a comfortable lead, but Wesley So was right behind him. But he even realized, he probably knew that bishop takes a3 is objectively the best move, but it leads to a draw. He plays f5, which is, I mean, it's the second best move, by the way. It's the best non-bishop takes a3 move. I mean, it does, like, worsen his position slightly. We oftentimes are taught that the pawn on f5 sort of, like, you know, just weakens the e6 square, but Fabiano doesn't really care about that. He cares about winning. So after the move f5, Sam plays rook h3, and then eventually the game kind of peters out to a draw, or what you would think is a draw. It peters out to a draw, right? Right. It went from dead equal. Now, I will say, it is pretty tricky, though. Like, black does have the passed pawns. I'm not just saying, like, oh, it was a draw, right? I understand it was tricky. Apparently, Sam can just play bishop d5, and after bishop takes, rook takes, just kind of, like, hold the draw here. h4, probably, like, rook h5, or rook a5, if I had to guess. Maybe not. Computer's just saying, like, just act like nothing's happening with king b3, and then go rook d3, and then go after the pawn. And I'm sure, I know I said it was tricky, but I'm sure a player of, like, Sam's caliber could have, like, comfortably drawn this, but apparently not from here, after playing bishop b7, which to me looks a little bit overzealous, just trying to go after this pawn, when Fabi has some ideas of his own by playing bishop g3 check. Sorry, bishop g6 check. And, you know, once you realize, I think a king going to the back rank kind of puts the king in danger, because then Fabi can play a move like rook f2, and rook g1 checkmate is coming. So Sam is forced to play, well, he has a few moves. He plays king d2, then Fabi finds rook d4 check, and you can't really go to either of these squares, because then there's rook d3, and then depending on the move, like, for example, if white were to play king c3, I believe there's rook d3, and then there is a rook b6 check. You win the bishop at the end. And if white were to play king e3, there's, like, rook d3, and after king e2, there's rook e6. And the rooks are just swarming the white king. So Sam plays king e1, but then eventually Fabiano just kind of hunts him down. He found this nice kind of sequence to play, rook d2 check. See, the king cannot go towards the rook because of the other rook. So Sam has to go to g3 and then check, and then Fabi finds this nice move, rook b6, forking the bishop and eventually mate. I mean, the b2 pawn is way more important, because if the bishop just moves, then rook takes b2, king e1, and Fabi can just play a move like rook g3, and just, for all intents and purposes, win the game. So Sam played b4, gave it the piece, but that was not going to be enough. And after h4, it was in this position that Sam Shankland resigned the game. And so that was round 9 out of 11. Round 10 was the round against, I think, one of the lower seeds of the tournament, Abhimanyu Mishra, who I believe at the time was the youngest grandmaster. I don't know if that record's been broken or not. I've kind of lost track, but clearly a young rising star. And this was just a masterclass by Fabiano Caruana. No other real way to describe it. It was a bit of a locked up position. A little tense. You never knew what was going on. In fact, if anything, looks like black had a slight advantage. He had a nice pawn on d4, the bishop pair, everything like that. But after rook f2, bishop f6, there was one moment where after knight b3, Abhimanyu could have played bishop c4, and Fabi could have just sacked the queen and probably held a draw here, but Abhimanyu did not do that. Abhimanyu took the knight, which probably looked good, but as it sort of turns out, after bishop d3, the rooks look nice on the c-file, but they're not really doing anything. In the meantime, Fabi in this opposite color bishop middle game has all the privilege to just kind of shuffle and chill, which is what he did. I mean, there's I had an arrow. What was that for? Oh, I guess it was for yeah, the bishop was rerouted to like c4. Now it's pretty strong, and Fabi just kind of shuffles, and eventually, queens are traded, and then after some time, some more shuffling happened. Rooks are traded, pawns traded, and then eventually Fabi just kind of simplifies into a winning endgame. He gets his king active in the middle, and then rook g6, and eventually just won the game. So I thought that was a really nice win by Fabiano in the penultimate round. The final round was a game where Fabiano, I'm pretty sure, just had a theoretical draw against Levon Aronian. It was like pretty quickly a draw. And then the reason why Fabiano's trainer, Grigory Oparin, was important was because Grigory had to hold a draw against, I believe, Wesley So in order for Fabiano to win outright. Because if Wesley won, then it would force a tiebreak. But Grigory held the draw, and all was happy from there. And the reason for the thumbnail and things like that, you killed the man but not the idea, is because Fabiano did tie Bobby Fischer's record for 4 consecutive U.S. championships. It's actually kind of crazy, because Fabiano won his first U.S. championship in 2016. Then he went 6 years without winning one until 2022. Then he won 4 in a row. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, because I think in 2017... Oh gosh, who won in 2017? Was that So Fabi won in 2016. I was just looking at this. That might have been Wesley. And then Shankland was 2018. Then Hikaru was 2019. I think Wesley was 2020. And then Wesley again in 21. Did Wesley just win all those, or was it? I don't know. But anyway, Fabi went like 5 or 6 years without winning one, then just wins 4 in a row. So obviously, congratulations to him tying the record for Fischer. Now, in no way am I comparing Bobby Fischer to I should say, in no way am I comparing Fabiano Caruana to Bobby Fischer. I mean, Bobby Fischer is always going to be like one of the greatest chess players of all time. Now, you could argue like generationally, like if they played a game, who would win and who gets to time travel to which era, things like that, resources. But on a legacy standpoint, it's always going to be Bobby Fischer who is a superior player. But Fabiano Caruana is also pretty good too.